Hello everyone, welcome back. So today, me and Rebecca are going to be working on the backside of the dam back here. There's a bunch of brush and there's trees growing on the backside of that dam, and you don't want that to happen. Those trees can compromise your dam because the roots will go through, and if they find water on the other side of the dam, the water will, I think, kind of follow the root system. It could cause your dam to start leaking and then fail. But besides just trying to save the dam and keep it in good shape, we're also going to be running some fence posts, and we're going to have a fence that goes across the top side of this dam, and it's basically going to go kind of to the end of the dam and then straight down the hillside of the dam. So I want to make sure that all this brush is clear before I start installing fence posts. So today we're going to start with the small brush. We'll see how far we get. So I've got that 3-winged blade, brush cutting blade. I've got that on a weed eater with handlebars. I think anytime you use a brush cutting blade, they want you to have the handlebars. That way you've got better control over it. And so we're going to use that for the small brush. That'll work for things up to about 1.5 inches in diameter. And it's not really like a saw blade. It just kind of whacks it off and just kind of breaks it. So it'll just kind of splinter those small trees and break them off. And then after we get the small brush cleared, I bought a new blade that I want to try out. So this is like looks like a saw blade, but this is for a weed eater. And you can see these little teeth right here. These are like chainsaw teeth. These are actually, you can sharpen these with a round file. So if you take just a regular chainsaw file and the flat guide, you can actually take that over here and you can sharpen these teeth. So it is a sharpenable blade, and I think this will cut down trees from about 3 to 4 inches. So I just basically want to find out how much of this backside of this dam we can actually clear with a weed eater before we actually have to get out the chainsaw. So let's go ahead and get started. So Rebecca will be helping me today, so I'll be cutting down I'll be cutting everything up with the weed eater, and then she'll be kind of picking up the brush. We got the trailer on the back of the truck, so we may put some of it on the trailer there. We also do there's a brush pile kind of down here at the bottom of the dam that's kind of pushed into the edge of the trees. And we may end up putting some of the brush on that pile as well. We'll just try to work whatever's the closest and see if we can get this all, pretty cleaned up today. So I just got done clearing all the brush off the backside of the dam, and that there was a workout. I think I went through at least about 2 tanks full of gas to be able to get all of the brush off the backside, and I've cleared it far enough of the area of where our fence posts will be in. I still probably have an additional 30 feet of the backside of the dam that I need to clean, or to clean all the brush off of, but today I'm just kind of focusing on where the fence posts will be and what will be inside the pasture. So we'll go ahead and put that brush cutting blade on, that saw blade on now, and see if we can cut all the trees off just using the weed eater with that brush cutting blade. So let's go ahead and get that get going. Oh, going backwards. You actually, this is a reverse nut, so you got to tighten. You got to actually go righty, you know, to loosen it. You got to turn to the right. It's backwards in most screws. It's pretty common that way on rotating equipment. So this blade here actually has cutter blades on two sides, so this doesn't really matter which way you put this blade on. But this blade is directional, and the way this is going to go on is going to be that steel, the writing of the steel, it's going to go face up on this one. So I was able to clear the whole backside of the dam with just using this brush cutter. Now as we kind of got to the end of the dam where it's more kind of where it meets the woods, there are bigger trees kind of back here where we stopped, and this was definitely not going to be able to get into those trees. I'm definitely going to have to, when I continue on, there will be a few trees in here I'll definitely have to use a chainsaw on. So most of the trees that we cut down were probably about a 4-inch diameter max. I think there was one in there that we cut down that was probably 5 inches. But this did do, you know, it was able to cut through a lot of that stuff. Ideally it works best on like a 2.5 inch or lower tree, because you only have just a little less than 2.5 inches from this little hub here out to the tip of the blade. So if it's, you know, if it's that size or smaller, I mean, it just goes right through it, no problem. And this thing like cuts like butter. It just does a really good job of cutting. The problem I had is when you have a big cut. So the way this works is you got to always work from the left hand side of this saw blade. So you're always trying to cut into here, because then that way it's kind of pulling, the teeth are kind of trying to pull that away from you. When you work on this side, it wants to kick the saw to the side, and if you want to kick, if you work on the right hand side, it wants to kick it back at you. So you always work from the left hand side because you have the best control over it. So on those bigger logs, I basically had to stand on one side of the log, cut into it, and then walk 180 degrees to the other side and cut into it again. So being on the back side of a dam and it's on an angle and you're standing there, I just couldn't quite line my cuts up. I think if I was on flat ground, I could have done it quite a bit easier. And then I found that with the angle of the dam here, it was easier probably just to kind of cut up a few inches and just cut it off and then come back and buzz it off at the ground. But it did do the job. Now, one other problem I ran into, I mean, some of them were difficult, don't get me wrong. They were difficult because they were bunches of trees, because there was an old stump that was cut off and then 3 or 4 trees grew out of it. So you had 3 or 4 trees nested together. And when you tried to cut one, like the front of the blade would want to catch on the other one and kick your saw, or the right hand side would catch it. So those bunches of trees definitely made it difficult, because you just couldn't get into a tree and cut it from one side or the other because the other trees were blocking. But I was able to kind of slowly work my way around and get them all cut. So I think this will work great on probably anything 4 inches or lower, as long as they're just single trees and you have clearance around them to be able to get the saw blade. So this saw blade can be sharpened. So the other one we used was this you know, it's like a tri-tip brush cutting blade, and I sharpened that with a grinder when we started. But I think the instruction manual just shows you using like a straight file, like a flat file, and just kind of like sharpening that direction. But this was so far dull anyway that a grinder was just way faster. And this one is not directional, of course. I can flip it around and then I have another sharp side that I can use. But now this, on the other hand, you know, of course it is directional, but you have to sharpen it with like with the chainsaw file. So you use one of these chainsaw files, the little flat guide, and these teeth are actually one's tilted this way and one's tipped that way, so the teeth are alternating. So when you sharpen it, you kind of have to have a 5-degree angle up or a 5-degree angle down while you're sharpening it. But it should sharpen right up. I do kind of wonder if you get this in the dirt a little bit how quick it'll dull. But right now this thing's it's still cutting great right out of the box. So one other tool I noticed that they had that doesn't come with this blade is there's like a little tool to bend these teeth so that you make sure they're the right, and then it's got like a little gauge to make sure that they're bent out far enough. And so I kind of wonder if these will bend up, or as you file the tooth down you have to bend it over to make sure that it's over 5 degrees to each side. But it's just this little bitty tool it kind of reaches over the tooth, and you just kind of bend the tooth over, and then it's got a gauge that you can make sure it's right. I think that you probably only have to use that if you really filed the teeth down where you've sharpened it several times, or you've damaged a tooth and bent it so that you get it back in the right spot. I don't have that tool. I just noticed it in the instructions a few minutes ago when I was looking through it. So in case you guys are wondering, that blade that we're using today is called the Woodcut from Stihl. And so far, I mean, I think it did a great job. Way easier to cut down anything that was woody, that's for sure. So I got this blade when I originally bought this weed eater when we were clearing the property. This was one of the original tools I used when we were trying to clear all this land. And I mean, there was tons of blackberries and just overgrown brush. And this thing worked great until you got to the trees, and you get to those little trees, and then you basically have to kind of smack it against the tree and just try to splinter the tree and cut it off, because this is not a saw blade, you know. So this is a little more archaic. And anything that's woody, this definitely works way better. It's like, I mean, it just cuts through it like butter. So in case you guys are wondering, I'm using a Stihl weed eater. It's got the handlebar set up. This is the FS130 Stihl weed eater. This is, I think, considered a professional weed eater, and I definitely wanted to get a good one when we bought the property. This was one of my initial purchases when we came out here and got this property, because there was so much overgrown brush. I knew I needed a really good weed eater. I definitely wanted something that I could cut through all of the tall brush with, and this was what I got. I've been very happy with it so far, and to be honest with you, I probably wish I would have got this blade just a little bit earlier, because this thing will do really good on trees for sure. But if you're just doing really tall grass and like blackberries and thorn bushes and stuff like that, I think that this blade here does an excellent job. So anyway, that's it, guys. I got to go ahead and clear the rest of this dam off. We didn't get all the trees off last night, so I'm gonna go ahead and get all the rest of the trees picked up, but the backside of this dam is just looking way better now. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.